Something happens in a man's mind the instant he realizes she's betrayed him. It's not loud. It's not dramatic. It's quiet. A stillness that doesn't belong to peace, but to shock. He doesn't yell. He doesn't throw things. He just stands there, staring at someone he thought he knew, and feels the floor under his life begin to crumble. Because betrayal isn't just about lies or actions. It's about the collapse of certainty, the realization that the story he built in his head wasn't real anymore. In that moment, every memory rewinds through his mind like a broken film reel. Every "I love you," every promise, every late-night conversation that once felt sacred, they all start to sound different now. He's not just losing her, he's losing himself, the version of him that trusted without hesitation. Most people think men explode when they're hurt. They imagine shouting, anger, revenge, but real heartbreak in a man doesn't make noise. It implodes. It collapses inward. Because from the time he was young, he was told that real men don't break down. They don't cry. They don't show weakness. So when the person he trusted most breaks that trust, he doesn't run to anyone. He just swallows it. Every question, every doubt, every scream he can't let out. And that's where the silence begins. It's not peace. It's shock mixed with pride, pain mixed with confusion. It's a man standing in the ruins of something sacred, trying to decide whether to rebuild or just pretend it never existed. From the time he's a boy, the world teaches him a language made of silence. When he falls, they tell him to get up. When he cries, they tell him to toughen up. When he feels lost, they tell him to figure it out. Little by little, he learns that emotions are landmines, that the safest way to survive is to stay quiet. He watches how the world reacts to male pain, how sympathy turns into suspicion, how vulnerability gets mistaken for weakness, how a man's honesty becomes ammunition. So, he builds armor, not out of steel, but out of silence. Every secret, every hurt, every disappointment gets buried underneath a practiced calm. He learns to nod instead of speak, to joke instead of confess. And people mistake that silence for strength. But here's the truth, that silence isn't strength, it's survival. Because the moment a man opens up, he risks losing something. Respect, control, pride, or the illusion of having it all together. So when betrayal hits him, his instincts don't say talk. They say hide. Hide the pain, hide the confusion, hide the feeling of being replaced, deceived, forgotten. He tells himself he's protecting his dignity, that staying silent keeps him in control, but really he's following an ancient code, one carved into him long before he even knew what love was. The silent code of men: endure quietly, suffer privately, recover alone. And it works until it doesn't. Until the silence starts to echo louder than the betrayal itself. When trust breaks, two forces wake up inside a man. Pride tells him to stand tall. Pain tells him to fall apart. And somewhere between those two voices, he disappears. Pride whispers, "Don't let her see you broken." Pain whispers, "You already are." He stares into the mirror, trying to find which one of them is telling the truth. Because if he lets the pain win, he fears he'll lose himself. But if he lets pride win, he'll never heal. You can see it in his posture, the way he forces calm, the way he answers, "I'm fine," with a voice that doesn't match his eyes. He's performing strength because that's all he has left. Pride becomes his armor. But armor doesn't just keep the world out, it also keeps the pain in. And the longer he wears it, the heavier it gets. Every unspoken word becomes a stone. Every suppressed feeling adds weight to the suit he can't take off. He wants to scream. He wants to ask, why? But pride holds his tongue hostage, because admitting how much it hurts would mean admitting she mattered that much. And that's the wound he's trying not to touch, so he carries both. Pride on the surface, pain underneath. One keeping him upright, the other slowly hollowing him out. And that's the cruel irony of betrayal. The moment he needs connection most is the moment pride convinces him he can't ask for it. For a man, betrayal doesn't just wound his heart. It threatens his reputation. He doesn't just ask, why did she do this? He also asks, what will people think of me? Because whether he admits it or not, his pride isn't built only on who he is. It's built on how the world sees him. Among men, there's an unspoken rule. You can lose money, you can lose a fight, but don't lose your woman. That's the one failure no one forgives. So when she breaks his trust, he's not just hurt, he's embarrassed. He feels exposed, like everyone can see the crack in his armor. And worse, he expects the judgment before it even comes. He imagines the whispers. She must have been unhappy. He must not have been enough. She found someone better. In his mind, every explanation points back to his own inadequacy. And because he can't bear that humiliation, he says nothing. He puts on a calm face, shows up to work, makes small talk with friends, and pretends nothing happened. Because the alternative, admitting that the person he trusted most betrayed him, feels like a public confession of weakness. He fears pity more than pain. He fears laughter more than loneliness. And he fears that opening up will turn him from a man into a story people tell about a man. So he swallows the truth, lets the rumor mill write its own version, and carries the shame of something he didn't even cause. That's the tragedy of male silence. The world punishes men for being betrayed just as harshly as it punishes them for being weak. And in that no-win scenario, silence feels like the only safe place left. When a man is betrayed, logic disappears. He starts searching for reasons, not because they'll heal him, but because not knowing feels unbearable. So he builds a theory, a cruel one. Maybe it was my fault. Maybe he worked too much. Maybe he stopped being fun. Maybe he didn't notice her changing soon enough. It doesn't matter that betrayal was her choice. His mind keeps replaying every small mistake, every missed signal, every argument that might have been the turning point. Because guilt, twisted as it is, offers comfort. It says, if it's my fault, then maybe I can fix it. If he caused it, he can control it. And control is easier to live with than chaos. But guilt has no mercy. It's a loop that never ends. The more he questions, the more answers he invents, each one cutting deeper than the last. He remembers her pulling away, her silence, her phone face down on the table. He wonders, did I push her into someone else's arms? And just like that, his pain turns inward. Instead of being angry at her, he becomes angry at himself. That's how betrayal rewires the mind. It makes the victim feel like the villain. He tells no one about this. Because how do you explain being hurt by someone and still blaming yourself for the wound? So he keeps it inside. And the guilt becomes his new language, spoken only in sleepless nights and silent car rides. It's not logical. It's emotional gravity. The heavier the betrayal, the harder he falls into himself. And the deeper he falls, the quieter he gets. After the questions run out and the guilt burns itself down, What's left is emptiness and the need to stay safe. At first, silence was pride, then it became habit. Now, it's protection. He stops talking about what happened because every word feels like reopening a wound. He doesn't want advice or pity or the kind of comfort that only makes the ache louder. So he goes quiet, not out of strength, but out of exhaustion. Silence becomes his shelter. It's the space where no one can twist his story, where he can breathe without judgment, where he can still pretend that control is possible. People around him think he's moved on. They see a man who's handled it well. But inside, he's living in a house with no windows, just walls built from everything he can't say. And those walls do their job. For a while, they keep out the noise, the shame, the questions, but they also keep out connection. They keep out healing. Silence, once a shield, slowly turns into a cage. It isolates him from everyone who might have helped him out of the dark. He doesn't realize it yet, but survival isn't the same as recovery. Survival is just not dying. And sooner or later, even the strongest man learns. If you stay silent long enough, the pain starts speaking for you, in your sleep, in your mood, in the way you stop trusting even those who never hurt you. That's when the silence stops protecting him and starts consuming him. There comes a moment when silence stops working, when the armor that once protected him becomes too heavy to wear, when pretending he's fine costs more energy than telling the truth. At first, he doesn't even know what's happening. He just feels tired. Tired of holding it all in, tired of the small talk, tired of being the strong one. Then one day, maybe in the middle of a late-night drive or after one drink too many, something inside him cracks, and out comes the truth, raw and trembling, not to everyone, not yet. Maybe just to a friend who won't judge, or to a stranger who listens without trying to fix him. It's not a confession. It's a release. The first deep breath after months of holding it. Because the real code he's breaking isn't about loyalty or masculinity. It's the belief that being silent makes him stronger. It doesn't. It just keeps him in pain. When he starts to speak, really speak, he realizes something unexpected. Vulnerability isn't weakness, it's clarity. It's the moment he reclaims his story from the betrayal. It's how he stops being defined by what happened to him and starts being shaped by how he responds to it. Talking doesn't erase the past, but it starts to loosen its grip. The memories don't sting the same way once they're spoken, because words are how pain finds the exit. And slowly, he begins to see that silence was never strength. It was fear disguised as control. Breaking the code isn't about shouting the truth to the world. It's about daring to whisper it to yourself. That's when the healing starts. Once the silence breaks, something unexpected happens. The world doesn't fall apart. The betrayal doesn't define him. And the weight he carried for so long starts to lift. He learns that strength isn't measured by how much you can endure alone, but by how honestly you face what you've endured. The guilt, the fear, the pride, they don't disappear overnight, but they lose their power over him. He can laugh again. He can trust himself again. He can feel without hiding. And in that quiet rebirth, he finds something far more valuable than revenge or closure: clarity. Clarity about what he deserves, clarity about who he is, clarity about the kind of life he wants to build moving forward. Silence doesn't have to be a prison. It can be a teacher, a way to gather strength, a way to prepare for the moment when you choose to speak, to act, to reclaim your life. He realizes that being broken doesn't make him weak. Being silent for a time doesn't make him less of a man. The real power lies in the courage to rebuild. And in that courage, he finds peace. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, just real, and just enough to move forward. Because sometimes the most profound rebirth isn't in being heard by the world, but in finally being heard by yourself. It taught him about boundaries, where they were crossed, and how to protect them in the future. It taught him about trust, how fragile it is, and how carefully it should be given. It taught him about self-respect, that no betrayal can take it unless he allows it. But the most important lesson, that strength isn't staying silent. Strength is knowing when to speak. When a man finally shares his story, he doesn't do it for sympathy. He does it to reclaim his life, to break free from the prison of quiet endurance, to ensure that pain becomes insight, not identity. And here's the subtle truth. The men who heal the fastest aren't the ones who stayed quiet the longest. They're the ones who learn to translate silence into wisdom and turn that wisdom into action. Because silence can protect you, but it can also trap you. The difference between being broken and being reborn is knowing when to let go of the quiet and finally step into your own story. Healing doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen if you approach it with intention. The first step is acknowledgement. Face the betrayal honestly, without excuses or minimization. Admit to yourself that it hurt deeply. Don't let pride or fear mask the truth. The second step is reflection. Ask yourself what you've learned about yourself, about trust, about boundaries. Identify the patterns that left you vulnerable, not to blame yourself, but to prepare for stronger, healthier relationships in the future. The third step is expression. Talk to someone who will listen without judgment, a friend, a mentor, a therapist. Write it down if you have to. Get the pain out of your head and into a safe space, because the mind can't heal when it's trapped in silence. The fourth step is reclaiming your life. Focus on your purpose, your goals, your passions. Reconnect with the things that make you feel alive and whole, because joy and fulfillment are the antidotes to betrayal. Finally, set new standards. Decide what you will accept, what you won't, and how you'll protect yourself going forward, not out of fear, but out of respect for yourself. Because silence may have kept you safe once, but speaking, reflecting, and acting will make you stronger for the rest of your life. And here's the quiet truth. You can't control what others do, but you can control how you respond. You can choose clarity over confusion, wisdom over regret, and a life rebuilt over a life broken. The betrayal may have left its mark, but it doesn't have to define your future. You are more than what happened to you, and sometimes the strongest men aren't the ones who never fell, but the ones who learned to rise after silence.